G'day, I'm Dave TPC, and at long last I'm starting my DIY series. Episode number 1 when it comes to DIY is how to salvage floorboards. How can you pull up floorboards without overly damaging the tongue and groove? Please stay tuned. There's 2 fundamental reasons why you'd want to pull up floorboards without damaging them. One is that you want to do some work possibly to the house or to your own house. You want to salvage the boards to be able to reuse as floorboards. It's very important that that tongue and groove doesn't get damaged, because without that connection you'll get movement between your boards when you walk on them, and that's where you'll get squeaky floorboards. So if they get cracked or damaged, which could happen while in the house or while pulling them up to reuse, you'll end up with squeaky floorboards. The other reason that you'll want to salvage floorboards is to use them for a completely different project. Might be furniture making or some other thing that you have in mind. In either case, if you want to be able to put them back together again, you need to be able to pull them up with limited damage. Preferably no damage, but that is a big ask. Or even if you want to cut the tongues and groove off completely and just use the bulk of the timber for another project, you still need to be able to get the boards up without cracking and splitting them and rendering them as useless. So today we're going to have a look at this room here, renovating this particular room. The boards are coming up. I need to do a little bit of work to the room, shift a few floor joists, etc. I'm going to pull these boards up and later relay them. So once you've got your first board up, how do you go about getting the rest of your boards up? Some people might grab some kind of crowbar, some sort of lever bar, pry bar, or they might simply rely on a hammer and just try to go across the joist and just lever up at an angle. But there's a problem with this method. If you're trying to salvage your board, what's going to happen is your tongue and groove are in together, and as you lever, you're going to either break the tongue or damage, most likely, the top of the groove in the next board. So what you need to do is somehow try to prise these boards up. Typically I'll try to get them in batches of 3. Now that doesn't mean 3 boards up at once. What I'm trying to do is lever 3 boards, one will come loose, and then I'll start to lever the next 3 boards, the top one will come loose, and so on and so on. How can we do that? There are some special tools on the market, but if you don't have some sort of special lever for pulling up floorboards, there is another way you can do it. And that's what I'm about to share with you. Well, how can we go about pulling up the floors if we don't have some kind of special pry bar or lever bar for pulling up floorboards, such as in this instance? You might notice I've got a small bit of steel laying across my joist. Using that and a lump of timber, a bit of this hardwood in this instance, I'm able to lever a few boards at a time. Now one thing you will notice is when I lever, I've got my lever point over or close to the joist. I'm not going to lever here because this bar is just simply too small to be able to prise the board up. And what I'm trying to do is get to as far as the third board. Third board, I just want to crack it slightly so that it's starting to come up. And at that point, the lead board should be pretty well free. I've put a nail in here, which lets me know that that's 3 boards. So I can go up like so, and just put a bit of pressure. I just want to work my way across. I don't want to get 3 all at once. Now I'm getting close to the point where this board should just roll up and come off, and then I'll work my way into the next one. You'll find each type of timber that you work with has its own characteristics. So here, this is old cypress pine. This floor is probably somewhere in the vicinity of 100 years old. It's brittle, it's hard to work with. If you're doing something like Baltic pine, then in my experience, that's always been a lot easier to pull up. The last 3 rows should come up all in one go essentially, as there's nothing tying in the edge of their floor. So we'll see how that goes now. At this point, if you haven't already asked, you're probably asking yourself, well, how did I get the first board up? And perhaps even where is the best place to start? I started just off centre. Ideally, if possible, you want to start so that where you're levering from is this edge of the board, because if it's this edge, you stand a high chance of damaging the bottom edge of the groove. And so with the rest of these boards going back towards the wall, I've got to be particularly careful not to damage that edge. Looking at the tongue and groove, this is particularly sloppy, but normally speaking, it's a tight fit. And so as you lift this board, remembering also that it's not going to just pry away like that because it's got a nail in it. It's going to want to pinch hard against the other board, and so the resulting effect, I'm going to have to twist these to show you. Oops, that broke in the wrong spot. The resulting effect is that you'll either break the top, the bottom, or the tongue if you're not lifting more than one board at a time. Generally speaking, you might get lucky. Well, how did I get the middle row or the middle board up? What I did was I set my saw depth to just slightly deeper than the thickness of the board. You'll see a score mark if you look closely at the floor joist. So here you'll see that I've gone outside of the nails, and we're taking off the groove and we're taking off the tongue. Looking at this piece here, so the nails are still in, and obviously there was a joist there, and there was one up here somewhere. Just cut across, and I was just able to lever it, and then lever it back again and pull it up. After doing that, what was left of the grooves just pulled away, what was left of the tongue just pulled away. So what about taking out your nails afterwards? Depending on the timber and what you're doing, sometimes you might be able to take the nails out without doing much damage to it. A little bit of quad here, which has been painted, and I'm just going to demonstrate on this. When you are knocking your nails out, try to have the nail next to something solid. They'll come out much easier like that, as opposed to trying to hit it in the middle. It speaks for itself. So how can we get a nail out without damaging the front? There's 2 ways. We could get some pincers, and we could just simply pull the nail out backwards. We damage this side, but if it's not going to be seen, it doesn't matter. And on this side, there's just the mark from where the nail went in originally. This was never patched up very well. Or what if the timber you want to use or salvage, what if the salvage timber you want to save both sides? You want this side to have as little breakout as possible, and you don't want to damage that. In that instance, if you've got yourself some soft timber, in this case I've got pine, because I'm quad, I've got to roll this to have the nail section line up with the timber. And what I'm doing is using the timber underneath to support the area that's being punched through. So this time I've got very minimal breakout, and I could proceed to pull that out, and we'll see the damage there is significantly less to the damage there. So I started this room a little earlier, and what I did, you might be able to see that there's small sections of floor against the wall still. So I actually cut each end so that I don't have to pull the plaster off the walls to get the boards out that are underneath the plaster. I'm not ready for that at this stage, although this room will get replastered. I just don't want all that extra mess just yet. What that has done is it's given me room to lay the boards back down, and I can slide them all to one end, and so now I've got a point of support next to each lot of nails that has to come out. You have your hand on the board, just hold it down as you knock the nails out. At this point here, we can just roll the boards over, and I will use the big pinch bar and just pop all the nails out. Just to highlight the difference between using the big bar and a hammer, takes considerable more effort to get the nails out, and when they do come out, sometimes the nails can flick up, and you definitely don't want to catch one in the eye. So if you haven't got a big bar and you want to pull the nails out, then the next thing is just to get a block, and they'll come out much easier. We see using a block and a hammer to pull your nails out is a little bit more time consuming. That's one way I go about pulling up a floor. Hopefully you've benefited, maybe you've learned a few things, if nothing else, been entertained. If you have a project and you'd like to have some ideas of how to approach a certain part of that project, please mention it in the comments below, and perhaps I can make that the subject of a future broadcast. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and feel free to share with others.